Well, the Liberal government has tabled new legislation tightening loopholes and increasing penalties for airlines, all in an effort to overhaul Canada's passenger rights charter. Transport Minister Omar Alghabra joins us live now with more on the bill and how Canadian travelers could be compensated. Minister, thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning, Tammie. It's great to be back with you.
All right. We'll start off with what the everyday traveler will be able to see now with these changes that have been announced that you propose to the Air Travelers Bill of Rights.
First, let me just say that when we saw the disruptions that took place last summer and over the Christmas holiday, it exposed a lot of vulnerabilities and challenges in the sector. And our government and I personally committed to Canadians that we're going to learn some of those lessons and take action to correct what needs to be corrected. We are announcing a suite of measures. One of them is strengthening the protections for passenger rights. You asked me what specifically the differences are. First, we're now making compensation mandatory, where we are reversing the onus on the airline. No longer the passenger has to prove that they are entitled to compensation if the airline cancels or delays a flight. We're putting in place rules for minimum service standards. So if a customer or a passenger is waiting for a delayed flight, they needed to have services provided to them, including food. We're simplifying the complaint process at the Canadian Transportation Agency, so they are dealt with at a much faster rate. So we're tightening and clarifying the rules. We're reducing the number of exemptions that airlines can justify not compensating passenger. And I feel this will be better. Obviously, it will protect passengers' rights, but also be better for the entire sector.
Can you elaborate on some of those exemptions that airlines could claim in order to refuse compensation?
Sure. So let me just say the current rules creates an exemption for safety, but without being very specific about what that means. And we saw examples of some airlines saying, oh, we didn't have enough labor or staff to manage a flight, therefore we're canceling it, and we're canceling it under the justification of safety, therefore we don't owe passengers compensation. We're removing that. That is unacceptable. An airline is responsible for making sure they have enough staff to fly that plane, and if they don't, then they are accountable to their passengers. So we're removing that. What we're allowing now is only one category. We're calling it exceptional circumstances. There needs to be further work on exactly what that is, but I'll give you an example. A snowstorm. I think Canadians understand that if a snowstorm occurs, airlines are not responsible for the weather. But what we're introducing, as I said, if a snowstorm occurs and justifiably delays a flight, the airlines are still responsible for servicing the customer, making sure they have access to food or telecommunication. So again, we're making it tougher, clearer, and stronger.
Now, are you concerned that some of these changes, making it tougher for these airlines to refuse compensation, will trickle down to the customer and then just lead to higher ticket prices? Because we're already seeing very high ticket prices right across Canada.
Look, let me just say, I was surprised and disappointed when some of the airlines in their objection to these new rules said that. No, I don't think so, because we're not asking the airlines to provide their customers more than what they promised their customers to do. We're expecting the airlines to deliver on what their obligations are to their customers. So I'm not asking the airlines to do more than what they promised their customers. And second, to be honest, given what we saw last year, I think the airlines left the government with no choice but to ensure that we have clearer and stronger rules where customers' rights are protected. And thirdly, I am confident that competition is going to make sure there will be some airlines who will figure out how to deliver services better and make sure that they have competitive prices.
Now, speaking of air travel, yesterday there was a day of action among flight attendants who want to put an end to unpaid work. Is the government going to look into potentially doing something in order to allow these attendants to be compensated when they're not being paid? A lot of people don't realize they're not being paid when there's boarding, when there's delays. They're not paid until they're out in the sky.
Let me just say, I and our government support workers to get paid fairly and equitably. And I want to thank the workers of the air sector who've been working really hard under extraordinary circumstances over the last 2 years. It's only fair that airline workers get paid equitably. There's obviously ongoing negotiations or discussions between workers and employers, and I believe the best way to resolve these is at the negotiation table. But I think the principle of making sure that people get paid for the work that they do is something that our government supports.
All right, and I'm just going to move on because we're out of time, Minister. But quickly, we know that the PSAC strike is continuing, and those picket lines are being escalated now to possibly include some major roadways and some major infrastructure here in Canada, including border crossings. What's being done now to prevent any delays or significant delays when it comes to these striking workers?
Look, I know that Canadians are hoping for no more disruptions to their economy, to their way of life. We're monitoring the situation. I know people have the right to protest and strike, and we're in regular discussions with ports and airports. So far, there have not been major disruptions to the operations of critical infrastructure. I hope we are able to resolve the strike as quickly as possible at the negotiation table. That's where our focus is, making sure that we reach a fair agreement as quickly as possible. We're putting all of our efforts there.
All right. Minister Omar Alghabra of Transport, thank you so much for joining us here this morning. We really do appreciate you taking the time.
Go Leafs, go.
All right, go Leafs, go. Thanks very much.